Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art, where we do deep dives into deep cuts and help you understand why damn things matter. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art in film, focusing on Quentin Tarantino's movie Death Proof, the one that doesn't get a ton of love. But I would argue, and this is why we're talking about it today, it deserves a lot more of your attention and a lot more love. To hash it out, of course, I am joined by one of our executive contributors, my favorite vanishing point, Mr. T Buck. Welcome, Buck.
Thank you. And welcome to everybody's favorite game. How many times T Buck can hit his mic boom in a recording session?
You're a little gravelly too.
I'm
You
a
need a
little gravelly
little wah
today.
wah.
Yeah,
He
I've
was
got
up partying last night. He's our
I've
international
got like
man
a
of
little bit
mystery.
of
So
a shockingly a little bit of a cold.
oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
where that gravel
it's where
comes
the
from. Well,
gravel
let's
comes
use it.
from.
Yeah, make it sexy. Let's
All
use it in
right.
the show here. So, Death Proof is a fascinating part of Quentin Tarantino's filmography. And of course, in this show, we're going to do deeper cuts than most. We could have picked pretty much anything from his filmography to talk about. We love a lot of his work, but this one, God, if we picked his earlier work, there's been what, a million shows already, million YouTube shows or podcasts that have dissected all of that kind of shit. But Death Proof, for some reason, just does not get the love. So that's my thesis. It deserves more love. Part of the reason is it doesn't get as much love is how it was released, how it
Yeah.
was produced, some of the marketing that was involved, things like that. And because of it, it was a commercial flop. Though I think I assume they've recouped their costs in later years with things like DVD sales, Blu-ray sales. I imagine they've done just fine. Those goddamn studios, but it's it's the cousin that we forget about, and I would argue, especially seeing it in a different lens in today's cultural landscape. I think it's still really good work.
hmm
Um, sometimes some of his best work, I think, can be seen in a piece like this in tidbits. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording the show here. Me and T Buck kind of talked about how you know it's like the king of limbs, if you will, of Tarantino's work. And part of part of that lack of love is purely because of the lack of the financial success that it got. And so, of course, when things aren't a financial success in Hollywood, it gets lumped into this kind of bad category, a letdown. Like, just people didn't like it, but not enough people really saw it. I
Yeah.
think it needed time to breathe, it needed time to age, and seeing it again, giving it now really the closer inspection it deserves. I'm really excited to talk about it today. So let's take a look and discuss Death Proof. But of course, before we go into it, we need a little context. We need a little background. So it was released in April 6th, 2007. And this is, again, this is what I hinted at. This was the beginning of, I think, some of the problems for this movie. It was designed to be a theatrically released double feature in the vein of the grindhouse movies of the 70s. If you don't know what grindhouse movies are, those were exploitation films. Those were B movies, C movies that did not get a commercial release like a lot of, the big hits, the blockbusters of their time. And so they were passed around in these smaller kind of, theaters
Midnight
to
movies.
yeah, to bring it to audiences.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much an American thing, the double feature. And we'll talk
Yeah.
about this a little later because part of the worldwide release, the international release, they were separated in two different movies, but they were supposed to be put together and seen as this one piece, this one entity. He did this with longtime collaborator Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez did the first film of the
I like the
two,
little
Planet
flair you put
Terror.
on that.
Rodriguez. Yes. And I'm a big fan of Rodriguez's, Desperado, Machete. I've followed his career for a long time. We'll probably do a show on him eventually, but this is maybe a little hint to his career. And obviously, he's been a longtime friend and collaborator with Quentin Tarantino. And the actual piece together was called Grindhouse. It wasn't the separate movies, even though the piece today is just about Death Proof, which was the second of the two films that was seen in the Grindhouse entity
Hmm.
together. Now, we talked about this a little bit. This was an homage, if you
Yeah.
will. This was a throwback to a lot of the stuff Rodriguez and Tarantino grew up with, which was slasher films of the '70s, and like I said, exploitation films of that era as well. And God, Jesus Christ, Buck, when I was doing the research for this, there is so many different subgenres of exploitation
Oh
films.
yeah.
There's like women in prison. There's the slasher films,
There's
like this one is
black
giving homage
exploitation,
to black exploitation. I mean,
sexploitation.
there's sexploitation. There's just so many things, and then that would, of course, there would be, I would say, a thin line between, not a thin line. There's there's a hard line too of where it would turn into snuff films almost, where some of these things we didn't know. I think a lot of people seeing them, if they were made to look incredibly real. They didn't know if they were real,
Yeah.
and then some were investigated as real pieces, and those are normally called snuff films, where it's completely illegal. It's not a fictional, where these films, even though it's sexploitation, blackploitation, whatever the category is, it's still fiction, it's still made up, it's still movie magic, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we're gonna focus on with Death Proof. The film stars Kurt Russell, Zoe Bell in her first role, and Rosario Dawson. Now, I wanted to start the discussion section, Mr. Buck, with I wanted to examine why this guy flopped. And I think I already hinted at kind of my thought process with it. Part of the reason was the marketing and the release.
Hmm.
It was very bloated. I don't know if you knew this. I actually saw this when it first came
When it
out.
came out, yeah.
Opening weekend with my girlfriend at the time. It just to put it in perspective, and then I'll give you the floor. She fell asleep. My girlfriend at the time. It was so long, it was so bloated, she fell asleep, and I think that's why we see a 65% Rotten Tomatoes to this day.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I think so. I have a couple theories. Yeah, one, it's too bloated. Especially in a lot of these B movies or midnight films, movies where double features, which I actually kind of grew up watching a lot of these.
Yeah, this is a very much an American thing.
Yeah,
That's why they had to separate them in international markets. They
my
were like, "What's a double feature?"
Yeah, and it was help. It was kind of bring people, and you got to remember too, when they would do this, this was before cable, and you
Right.
still had three channels. I mean, cable, at least when it was coming out, it was in its infancy.
Yeah.
So, growing up, I actually was introduced to my stepdad. Was he watched a lot of these movies and kind of is the same age as Tarantino, so I grew up watching, kung fu movies,
Yeah.
like this. If for those of you remember, MST3K, Mystery Science Theater 3000,
Hell yeah.
Monster Vision on TNT with Joe Bob Briggs,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
a lot of this. So I think why I'm saying this is I think the people that saw it got it, but it was a little
Yeah.
too inside baseball for a lot of people. Like if I didn't know, I didn't pick up on all the references. Like I didn't understand about the missing reels. Why the film and one of the things that was interesting to me, the first half of the film looks really damaged and worn and used, and they purposely made it look like that, but the second
Yeah,
half
and
doesn't.
we'll talk about it a
Yeah.
little more in detail when we get to diving into all of the intricacies that made this movie an homage. Yeah, so they purposefully made it look damaged, broken, missing reels, things like that. Well, in the Grindhouse version, there's missing reels, but in the international version, the one that's just a standalone movie, there's no
Yeah,
missing
there's
reel
no
stuff.
missing reels in it. Yeah.
And I actually had to look it up while we've been talking, but the original, so the double feature version, the Grindhouse actual original vision was 191 minutes. So
For
over
death
3 hours
for everything?
for both,
Okay.
for the Grindhouse feature. So that's Planet Terror, some fake trailers, and we'll talk about that later, and and then Death Proof to bring it together as a final package.
Yeah.
That's why my girlfriend fell asleep. I think by Death Proof, I could hear her literally snoring in the theater
Oh,
next to me.
that's amazing. Uh,
Yeah,
and also
she was done.
it's hard for theaters. You gotta understand there's a business side to theaters. They want to show as many films a day as possible. So this is why you hear about studios and some films jumping in and saying you have to cut it down to this much time,
Right, exactly.
because
Yeah,
there's a business side behind that too. And putting in it's that's why you don't see very many movies over 2 hours. And when you're getting up to that 3 hour mark, it's a rare exception. It's like a Tarantino or something like that, or a limited release.
you almost never see this
No,
anymore. Something that runs over 3
Hateful Eight
hours
was probably one of the
was
last
up there,
ones. But that was also kind of, there's also this
and
novelty side coming back in the film. Like with Hateful Eight, I believe he shot it in 70 millimeter.
yeah, I
And
think it's
so
on actual
they
film, not
actually
digital.
rented out, and I actually went and saw it at a theater here in
And they had an intermission
had an
and stuff.
intermission, but they also had the old
Go get some
projector.
snacks.
They had the 70
Yeah.
millimeter projector that they actually took around to different cities and stuff like that. So it was cool.
So yeah, there I guess the point is, yeah, there was a lot of extra things probably going on behind the scenes that we probably still to this day don't exactly know why it wasn't as commercially successful as it probably could have been, especially when you pair it up to all of his other
Yeah,
movies. I mean, they made a ridiculous sum of money,
and they were fairly
especially with
low budget
international
films,
markets.
all of them.
Yeah, and exactly. Compared to this one, and I think a part of that is in, yeah, all of these promotional tactics and how it was released and things of that nature. So from there, let's go ahead and really dissect this guy. I think we need to start with the heart and soul of any film or fictional piece, and that is the writing and the
Hmm.
characters. So I feel like even the writing itself was designed to be a little bad, for lack of a better word. I mean,
Yeah,
I remember thinking how characters were thrusted into the next arc of the narrative, where literally to convince in the and this was, so most movies, if you don't know, are written in 3 acts, right? You have your setup, you have your conflict, you have your resolution kind of acts. This one really only has 2 acts.
yeah,
It really has a setup and a
and
payoff. Like,
and they mirror each other very well.
they mirror each other because, so yeah, they and this is where I have a series of questions that I think will help really dissect and help to discuss this movie, because, and T-Buck doesn't know this, he didn't get to see these beforehand, so this will definitely be organic, because we need to talk about the fact that this is a female driven, female centered
Hmm.
story. And even in, this was 2007, like I said, and even in 2007, we were still in this age of, it was pre Me Too movement, pre, it was still kind of, Hollywood still in this autopilot zone of making movies cater towards men and every, like there if there was a female lead, she would be like a Mary Sue, or she would be the only female in the whole universe kind of thing, like Alien, stuff like that, where or she was this, yeah, this uh, this unstoppable force, if you
Yeah,
will. They weren't three-dimensional, they weren't, real women that other women could look up to and be like, okay, that's me on screen, essentially. And it was part, God, it's so hard to explain. So it was part, female empowerment, but then there was also hypersexualizations of these characters at the same
yeah.
time. So my first question for you, T Buck, is would this get a different viewing or critically speaking, if it was made today, post Me Too, if it came out, would it be this looked at as this mirror since it was designed to be kind of bad?
Yeah,
These characters were designed to be hypersexualized because on one side, and this is I guess this is a two-parter question. On one side, it's clearly a mirror,
yeah.
and how we're hypersexualizing these kind of female characters. But at the same time, there is a part of me that's like Quentin Tarantino has does have a history of God, how should I put it?
Pushing the
Not
envelope.
necessarily, yeah, and not necessarily toxic masculinity, but there has been criticisms
Well,
there. I'm not going to say that, but I would say other
y
critics have said that. So I guess where's the line between this is social commentary and this is maybe a writer director just wanting to see some ass?
this kind of is an ever evolving discussion with Tarantino in general. I think in the '90s it had to deal more with race,
Yeah,
especially if you
because there's a lot of N words, being thrown
and
out
there was a
in
lot
his
of
movies, and it's a
criticisms
white guy
with
writing for black
yeah,
actors.
Tarantino, especially in Pulp Fiction. It seemed like he just enjoyed saying n bombs. And then if you think of like Jackie Brown and things like that, like there's definitely he's always kind of pushed.
Another underrated,
Yeah, that one
movie,
was
honestly.
fantastic, and it's kind of also
Love me some
relates to
Pam
kind
Grier.
of this in a little bit because Jackie Brown, Pam Grier being in a lot of the um, kind of the strong
She
female
was
lead
in black
in black
exploitation movies,
exploitation.
you know
Yeah,
yeah, stuff growing up, so
I
that's why she was cast.
but yeah, and I think it's hard for me.
Let's do the first one first. How would it be viewed today if this was released this probably not this year, maybe a year ago, before the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it would draw very heavy criticism. I don't think you would probably see, especially the same actresses that are working in it, probably supporting it as much. Especially, I'm thinking Rosario Dawson.
Yeah.
You would probably get a little bit of pushback. The dialogue might have been a little different. But I think if you put
Could
it
it be
in,
seen as could it be seen the other way,
yeah,
where it was a female empowerment type of
yeah,
because that's what it is on one
yeah,
hand.
I think you would maybe change some of the subject matter. I think the one that probably would be the biggest problem is the first act, especially when they're talking about the radio, that their friend will give you a lap dance kind of thing. I think
Yeah, I felt like the lap dance scene was pushing, especially in
in
today's
today's
cultural
culture,
climate.
yeah. I
I think a lot. I would still feel. I even kind of cringed when I saw it, and I feel like it would really not. It would be almost in bad
yeah,
taste probably
and
now.
and if you put it in the frame of what was trying to be achieved here, and I don't think
But they didn't need to see. But they show the entire lap dance like for a full
I
song. I
know.
feel like they could have, just like a sex scene. Sex scene, you can hint at what happens and then cut to the next
Well, but this is
scene, right?
Yeah, this is Tarantino, and do I think he was just trying to like, he's a horny dude trying to show off like some no, I think what he was trying to do is he was trying to show like, hey, and back in when I was a kid, when I watched these movies when I was younger, they had scenes like this and this is what they would show.
So you're more leaning on the side that this was still smart writing and this was done purposefully to show to get that kind of a reaction out of the
Yeah, I
audience.
think it was more I th- just I hope. But to me it seemed more like it was done intentionally to try to fill the in vein of what these films were.
What these
Yeah.
movies
Yeah.
were. So yeah, let's talk about more of the writing in terms of yes, trying to create an exploitation film in modern era with big budgets and things like that. Because so yeah, the first act had these kind of hypersexualized female characters. It was still like this female empowerment in a way, but I think there's a lot of social commentary on pushing that to the forefront, and of course, wanting to and what you're talking about, wanting to show that. Whereas
Yeah, okay,
the other half of this coin was these not sexually
well,
sexualized
I will
girls.
say one thing. He I think he has a thing for feet.
Oh, the very first scene is
Yeah, I
feet.
think
Oh
he's
yeah,
got, like, a little
this
bit
is
of
a
a foot
common
foot fetish, so maybe
this is a
that's
common thread.
yeah, and I'm thinking, like, of just, like, going back to even, Kill Bill, and there's that whole scene where she's trying to move her toe, I think he might have a little foot fetish thing.
I don't think it's little, and I don't think it's a secret. I feel like once fucking was it Brad Pitt? There was someone during the acceptance speech at some awards ceremony. I want to say it was Brad Pitt. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Where it was for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was accepting Someone was accepting their award and they're giving their speech and they fucking talked about it.
Yeah,
They're like, "Well, I want to thank I want to thank all my co-hosts and all my you know, all of my fellow actors and all of my fellow actors' feet and like shit like that." Where like he was just really fucking on a big scale
yeah.
uh kind of, really teasing, joking about this clear, open secret about his foot fetish. So,
Yeah, no, and
um,
and and the weird thing is too when I was watching this, speaking of that, not to get off subject, but it's still weird to see the Weinstein Company come up a lot.
oh my god, I thought the exact fucking same thing. I remember seeing the going through the credits because I didn't know if there was like any hidden stuff at the end. There was a lot of female, just like like headshots of women at the very end that was tied to the music. That was
It wa
probably the only
it
little
was
extra thing.
they were like,
Um,
driver's license photos, they looked like,
I don't know what they were, but
or
yeah, there was some.
headshots or something
I
like
don't know
that.
if that was in old Grindhouse movies. I have no idea, but I remember, yeah, going to the very end and seeing the Weinstein Company LLC, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah,
Talk about. I feel like this is why this conversation about death proof is a little more complicated than really meets the
yeah,
eye. Because it came out 14 years ago, 15 years ago. It's completely Our cultural landscape has completely shifted. Um, but then, yeah, I feel like it's so complicated because on one hand, there is yes, he's trying to create this narrative that is a female empowerment movie, but there's clearly hypersexualization, and it can really be seen both
yeah,
ways. And how you it depends on the person really at the end of the day because yeah, I want to lean always towards, I mean, because we've seen it in his filmography before and after. There's a lot of smart writing, there's a lot of good dialogue, and everything usually serves a purpose. um that's probably where we'll segue to just talking about the dialogue and the writing, where there was a little more wallpaper, what's considered wallpaper dialogue versus
th
everything holds a purpose.
yeah. Can we get to that a little bit because I feel like that's the biggest weakness of this. I the
Okay, go ahead,
so
shoot.
so in his other films, and I'm thinking the one I always bring up a lot is one of the more recent ones, but Inglorious Bastards. The first, like, that first 10-15 minutes, or was it 20 minutes? I don't know. There's a lot of
Oh,
dialogue,
the tension is
but the
like
tension, but you
thick,
can feel it because you
oozing.
understand what's going on, and the actors, just with their body language alone, they play such a, brilliant role in that. And this, like you said, it's a lot of wallpaper. They could at least, and this is one of the other things I think that hurt it a little bit, was the runtime for Death Proof is what, around 2 hours.
Ooh, keep talking, let me look
Yeah,
it
I
up while
think
we chit
you
chat.
could definitely cut out half an hour of this easily.
It was 113 minutes,
Okay,
so almost
almost
2
2 hours.
hours. I feel like it could have probably been a solid
That's what
90.
I
I
was thinking
wouldn't
too. Like, which, what most of these
yeah,
films, They
would
they
be.
would be, yeah. And
Yeah.
so to me, it's a little hubris here. Like, he's like, I want to get out. Yeah, I'm almost did my Tarantino impression, but I won't do it.
It's hard to do with unless you I can do it if I hear him, like if I saw like a video of him, I could do it right after, but just doing it from memory, it's tough.
I like watching people talk about fucking movies, and I want them to sit there and talk and talk and talk,
I
because
disagree with
that's
you. I
basically
disagree
what
with
I
you.
did when I'm with my friends and I'm running around talking around. I talk about fucking movie anyway.
That's pretty good.
Um,
I feel like that's pretty good without having a reference point.
yeah, without having a reference point. But yeah, no, I felt like this he almost just took it a little too far. It I was starting to get bored
I
and I
I
felt like he
I
did that in
would
the Hateful
say
Eight too, but yeah.
oh yeah, I would. This is why I find Death Proof fascinating because movies like The Hateful Eight, and even to a lesser extent, even a little bit of Inglorious Bastards, get a lot more love. And not necessarily Inglorious Bastards, but definitely The Hateful Eight. There were so many times I was bored to
Yeah.
tears. A lot of people don't like to criticize, us, um, you know, uh, art connoisseurs and things like that. We hold certain artists in this regard where it's hard to really want to criticize them, but sometimes they make things, and this is a personal, opinion. They make things that are not always going to fly. You could tell that this was made, and I'm talking about again about The Hateful Eight. This was made to be a play, you know, to
Yeah.
be seen in a playhouse and not necessarily a movie because it was just so
Well,
boring
that's
at so many times.
I don't know if I've told you this. That's been always my argument with Tarantino is that he really should be a playwright. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
And that's what he is.
yeah.
He always says, "If I can make a story, in terms of writing it like I would write a novel, then he says he's done his job."
Yeah.
So he writes every movie as if it was a novelization. And then I think and then he does, whatever tactic he does to adapt it to the screen.
And I think a lot of it too is a lot of people love that because it's so refreshing and different. It's not like
Yeah.
Michael Bay, like,
Well,
flashing.
and he's not,
Yeah.
he famously is not shy about making it very clear that he is straight up stealing a lot of other
Yeah.
techniques and methodologies. But the difference between him and other people is he puts all of these together to make it its own thing.
Hmm.
So it's still like a jazz piece in a way, and it's still its own thing because he will lump so many different already true blue, very validated and already well regarded techniques and methodologies. Sometimes it would be shot for shot. I've actually seen video essays dedicated to this where it'd be shot for shot, like some sort of scene, and he would do it the exact same
Yeah.
way. But then there would be a lot of other ones like that in the movie that, you know, he can easily say, "Oh, I'm just giving a try."
Well,
I'm giving a tribute
yeah,
because it
he's
goes back to that old saying, like, a good artist borrows and
good
a great
artist steals.
artist
Well,
steals. Yeah,
and that's part of his whole thing because he's very into creating homages and um
which is this whole movie.
that's usually his whole movie. He makes movies talking about movies. I mean, that's what Pulp Fiction is, if you think about it.
And yeah, I mean, his Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is
I have not seen
is
that yet.
is an homage to old
Yeah,
Hollywood.
I'm embarrassed
It
to say I
is
have not
it
seen it,
is
but
it's okay. Again, not my
yeah,
favorite. My favorite is we should probably do this real quick. My favorite is Django.
that's a good one. I really like that one. That's p- I was thinking about that today. It's a tie between that one and I is I actually really love Kill Bill 2, Part 2.
Okay,
And the reason I
okay.
like that one is that
Why two, not one?
so I think one is more like it's that homage to a lot of samurai films and kind of that over gore kind of
Oh, yeah, like a comical anime gore,
the
and
reason
blood
I like
splatter.
Kill Bill 2 so much, it's slower paced. It's got that kung fu kind of and western feel. And I don't know what it is. It's kind of like
Like, when she's
when
training
she's
and shit,
training
you know?
it's a lot like the kung fu, but like that for some reason I love the ending of that. That whole
Mm,
dialogue where they're in there.
yeah.
It's a lot like a western. And
Oh, yeah. No, he loves Westerns. That's why,
yeah.
usually he's taken a, Stanley Kubrick approach to his filmography where everyone is a little different except for the Western.
Yeah.
He did The Hateful Eight, and that was technically his second Western.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I love that kind of feel. But yeah, I mean, and then Reservoir Dogs too. I I love that film because and I picked 3. But, I saw Pulp Fiction first when I was growing up, and I was like, "Yeah, I maybe I was too young to really understand," but for
I
some
think I
reason
saw Reservoir Dogs
yeah,
first.
Reservoir
So I
Dogs was
actually did it in
first.
the right order.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I saw that
Oh,
first
okay.
before I saw Pulp Fiction.
That one blew me away more than anything.
I mean, well, talk about, going back to him being more of a playwright. That is a play on
Yeah,
screen. That is definitely,
definitely.
it's kind of all in that one warehouse. It's one location. Um, and
Stuck in the
it's
middle
the
of With You, that
complications.
song or whatever it's called.
It's the complications of the character that make the tension and stuff that you only, yeah, it's within this very contained situation, and that situation is where the tension brews instead of these, yeah, these huge Michael Bay set pieces of fucking aliens and robots crashing into each other. Though that has its place too, like a la Star
S
Wars and shit like
Speaking of
that.
that, I'm going on a T-Buck tangent quarter.
Let's do it.
Red Letter Media one time watched, like, all 3 when there was only 3 Transformers films at the same time. Like, they watched
Oh right, no, I
do you
do
remember
remember this.
this?
I remember.
They
I remember
watched them
this.
tried
Yeah.
watching them all at the same time, and it was so funny. They were even saying that their brains were starting to melt at one point.
Yep, that sounds about
Yeah.
right.
S
I feel like this is a good segue to tone.
Yep.
So the writing and the characters, and obviously the look of the piece create tone. This was, this is supposed to be a slasher film of the '70s, with just his Quentin Tarantino, style, his way. And it really, to me, it really
It's
isn't.
not.
I feel like the first act, rewatching it again, obviously, when you watch this for the first time, you don't know that there's this amazing little CGI slash practical stunt that they do to show when Kurt Russell's, antagonist, villainous, he's the killer character killing these girls by doing a head-on collision. But when I was rewatching it again, I just couldn't wait for that to happen. I was like, let's just get to
Yeah.
the fucking cool part, that feeling. Whereas in the second act, you get to the cool part a lot quicker, and
Mm,
yeah, there's still a lot of build up and
I would
stuff
say
like
it's a
that because
lot
you want to see.
longer, like, the cool part, if you wanna say the exciting,
Yeah,
like,
and then
climax is
and
definitely
essentially it's
it's a great car chase.
yeah, essentially, long story short, it's a series of car chases, and they do it the old school way, the vanishing point way. That's why when you see these little references used in the movie, and I think this is where the smart writing comes in, where he would talk about stuff that's clearly him talking. Quentin Tarantino is like, "Oh, I fucking grew up with Vanishing Point and all this stuff," and the other characters, would be like looking at him inquisitively, and he would stop and be like, "Do you guys know what I'm even talking about?" And they're like, "No, no one does." Because that's the audience. No one, like, that's how I felt. I was like, I have no idea who. So he's smart enough to know no one's gonna know all of the little intricacies and the deep dive, deep cuts like he does. And so he put that into his characters, his supporting characters. Like, I have no idea what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
like, I haven't heard of I haven't, like, thought of Robert Ehrlich since maybe I was a teenager. I saw a movie of his, but, like, that name popping in my head, I was like, "Oh, man, that's a reference back to, like, '70s, '80s kinda thing."
Right. And I like what he did with the tone of the killer too. He was like when he would like put in like uh you know eye drops and he would sneeze. There was
Yeah.
like a scene where he's like about to do a sneeze and it's a false alarm. And just like his,
Breaking the 4th wall,
because
too.
yeah, he's just not menacing,
Yeah.
right? Like this could be anybody. This could be your dad deciding to go on a killing
Well,
spree through a death proof
and
car.
that's part of, like, some of those
Of the
the
humor
humor in the
too.
movies back then is that some of these villains were kind of, like, cheesy, humorous, kinda silly
Silly.
yeah, guys that you were like, "What?" Whatever.
Well, because when you think of like the not the peak, but when I think of a slasher movie, I think of Nightmare on Elm
Mm,
Street and Friday the 13th,
yeah.
the true blue classics. And they wanted to make those characters scary, especially I mean, Friday the 13th, I feel like Jason went through so many different character choice, like whoever was playing him, they went through a lot of different character choices, but the one that we know of today, like the heavy breathing, the very slow moving, like unstoppable force kind of
Yeah.
Jason, that's menacing, right? Like that is so scary where you have Kurt Russell putting eye drops in. And I don't know, there's just something about it that
He's
really,
wearing his
all these
icy
little
hot,
touches really,
uh
yeah, it really stood out to me as like, because he did a good job of not of coming off as, I think a smart killer or smart writing to make an evil character like that is the wolf in sheep's clothing
Yeah.
kind of villain, where you and he but this one was taken to an extreme. The icy hot jacket,
The
Jesus
icy hot, and
Christ.
then I just like how they did, like, some of the obvious product placements, which is probably, again, an homage to doing some advertising, like they do the wild turkey. They show the bottle, them pouring it out. They have icy hot, Big Red soda, which is
Yeah.
something I
And
can't
then
find
the
around here, but when I was growing up, Big Red was a big soda that
and
you
and
had.
and then also people forget that all of these movies, all of these stories are in a Tarantino
Yeah.
universe. Like when you see stuff like the cigarettes and stuff, those are like, a fake brand that he puts in all of his movies to show that this is one tied universe. Or like the Vega brothers, you saw that in Reservoir Dogs versus Pulp Fiction,
Mhm.
things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and he did wanna have, like, a I remember he did wanna make a Vega Brothers movie for a long time,
Right,
but
right.
that
Just
never
like there's
happened.
there's always this talk of Kill Bill Volume
Yeah.
3, and there's a Vega brother movies, but they're too old now. I remember him saying, "Well, the people that played them are too
Like, in
old, and
their
I didn't want to
70s now.
recast them." Yeah,
It
not 70s. I mean, they're just
well,
it's
isn't, he's gotta be Travolta's gotta be up there.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not gonna look it up. Usually, we look shit
I'm
up
looking it
while we're.
up.
Oh,
He's
okay.
67.
Uh, okay. You're actually pretty close. I
Yeah.
thought I thought he was younger than.
Well, he had
And
been around for a while.
And so to tie all these things together, the writing, the characters, the tone, we have unconventional film techniques being used. We touched on this a little bit. T-Buck did. Now I really want to dive deeper into it. So there is the cigarette burn kind of look. So what you have to understand is these old, when they were actually filmed and they're actually reels, these were taken to so many different places and they were beat up.
Yeah.
So to create that beat up look of this scratchy film, they had to put that in with CGI, and also to create the feel of, I would say, in the unconventional technique methods. Besides just the look of it, we need to talk about the editing, because there would be hard cuts of
I
music in and out.
Yeah.
Sometimes there would be like literally a picture on screen of like a car waiting at a you know a light, an intersection, and then it would just be gone. Going from black to white, white to black, or I mean, going from black and white to
Color,
color,
yeah.
back to black and white. And my favorite is probably the title.
Oh, yeah,
It's not called Death Proof. It was like Thunderbolt.
yeah, and then they definitely spliced in Death Proof on,
Right.
yeah, to make it look
It
like
was
that.
Thunderbolt, and then there's a real, almost like a real missing kind of a piece that just put in Death Proof.
Yeah, it's
And so this happened a lot too with these movies. They would be renamed to try to, I guess, go over or under like censoring. And when people are trying to shut them down, they're like, well, we're not that movie, we're this new movie,
yeah.
even though it was the same movie.
Yeah, renaming, or sometimes they would splice in, like, stock footage or footage from other films and would put that in there, and there would be some pretty nasty kinda hard cuts. Because remember, these were very low budget, and they were just trying to shove them out, like, they were just trying to push them out, so
Yeah.
there wasn't really an editing process, which really is can make or break a film in most
Oh my
cases.
gosh,
If
yes.
classic example, Star Wars. The original Star Wars, apparently the first cut was a complete mess, and they said that a lot of the editing that took place, which was actually by
Wait, with the very first one, A New
A
Hope?
New Hope, yeah, in '77. They, which was actually George Lucas's wife at the time. She kind of helped
Oh,
save a
I
lot
didn't
of the
know that.
film.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was a lot of dialogue problems too,
Interesting.
which we had all kind of
Interesting.
figured out once the prequels came out. Lucas's kind of dialogue choices sometimes, and a lot of the cast actually helped out on some, especially Sir Alec Guinness. Anyway, I'm getting off track, but yeah, you would
It's
get,
all right. Tangent corner, baby.
but it's all around the same time, when the stuff came out. So yeah, you could those hard, like really bad edits. I know, like the one that I picked up on was Rosario Dawson sitting on the front of the car when it switches from black and white to color. You can see her kind of
Color.
shift a little bit and movement. And I can't tell what the black and white was, that because was that kind of leading to like
I don't know
dailies,
if it was supposed to be a shift in tone, kind of black and white,
or did this actually
because
happen? I was trying to look this up. Like, what was this from the dailies reel when something would happen to the actual color reel and they didn't have time and they would have to
like
splice
what they
in
were
the
trying
daily. They'd
to,
have to,
do the homage
yeah,
to,
they would have to
like the
maybe
actual history of what
splice in the
something like that
dailies.
would be?
Yeah,
God, that's a good question. I don't know. I would assume yes. I always think when I see stuff like that, it's always it's a tonal shift that they're trying to go
I thought
for, but
maybe it was
obviously I didn't think
just,
about it that way.
yeah. To me, it seemed like something that
Like they ran out of yeah, they
Tarantino had
ran out
seen,
of
like, yeah,
film.
they've ran out of film. Either they only had black and white available, or they were actually shooting dailies at the same time on a different camera and had to
And they, like,
actually
lost the other
lost the
reel,
other
so they
reel or
just had to
something. They had to
splice the
splice
other
it
shit.
in. Yeah,
That's a good I don't know, that's a good point.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know is the answer, but, if anybody knows to tell us, or
but,
let us know.
yeah, it's
So,
there's a lot of, like, I think the one thing that I like about this.
I think that's probably now that we're talking about it, that's probably the smartest stuff they did to make it look
Yeah,
old.
yeah, and that's probably my favorite part of this film. It's just like those little Easter eggs and those little hard cuts, and like there's a couple points where like you just miss, like it seems like whole sequences of the film, maybe like 10 or 15 seconds, where they're like walking out of the bar and then all of a sudden they're just around the car. Um
Right.
which probably was either purposely done or there was damage to the reel, or it was so poorly planned that they just jump to other scenes, and most of the time in when you're making a real film, you go back and fix those in reshoots or re-edits and things like that. So it's it's pretty
Well, and they're
entertaining.
meticulously mapped out
Yeah,
with the, I forgot what they're called, the little cartoon they're little, like, literally, like, the scenes are actually drawn out.
yeah, storyboards.
Um Storyboards,
Yeah,
yeah. These are meticulously, uh, you know, pieced together with storyboards and stuff like that. And you've probably heard of famous examples of like, what's his name doing T2? He did it all himself by hand. Things like that. The
James
director of
Cameron.
T2, Avatar. Yeah, James Cameron. Uh,
Yeah,
Him doing like all of his own storyboards by hand, I found is very fascinating.
JJ
Before we
Abrams does that too. He does a lot of it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Before we move on and bring this round circle and go into our gyms, so I wanted to touch on editing a little more because uh, he has used the same one until Django. Now, I think there's a reason I like Django the most, and part of that is the editing. Now, I liked you should learn this name. Her name is Sally. It's either Menke or Minky. It's probably Minky. If anybody knows how to pronounce it, or I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. So Sally Minky, we'll say, has been his editor for every single film up until Django,
Hmm.
and I think using that same editor, it definitely created a very, when you see any of the movies before Django, it definitely created a very specific look to the film and how it's edited. Even when it's edited correctly, obviously, Death Proof was designed to not look conventional
Yeah.
or correct. It was made to look bad. But Django, is almost like it's almost edited like an action movie, and it kind of is in a lot of ways, and that's why I like Django the most is all of the best parts of his writing versus cinematography versus the actors he used versus the editing versus the practical and special effects. I feel like it really all came together in that movie where there was a lot of things I liked of those qualities in his other movies. It just didn't quite have this nice tied bow at the end like it did with Django Unchained. Um, and part of that is the just the change in editing, I think.
Mhm.
I like Sally, but I definitely like what he did with his later movies without Sally, so that's
Yeah.
all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, no, I'm just I'm thinking about a lot of things and with the editing and stuff like that. It wants me to it's making me think like how more difficult was that to add in some of these things or to kind of break that cycle because I could see people like that were actually working on this film. It becomes almost
Like Roll Your Eyes or something about that.
yeah, it's difficult like to break that habit and some of these things. But yeah, it's definitely my favorite part of this whole series. And like you said, it does get a little probably it's not as appreciated enough. But I think that's okay in some instances because again, not everybody's going to get everything. You're not going to hit a home run out of the park every time, but some of these underappreciated things, like just in music, some of the underappreciated albums, you find over time that they become more appreciated overall.
Yeah, time is the all-time
Yeah,
healer of art, of a misunderstood
yeah,
art, right? Some of the best things ever, including film, film, traditional fine art, definitely music, never were hits out of the
yeah,
gates. It took 10, 15, 20, or more years for them people to be like, "Oh, this is really fucking good." And a lot of the problem is we've talked about this in other episodes of our show. eh, in people don't know how to react to new art. They don't get it.
yeah.
I hate to, that makes it that's our pretentious side coming out. They don't fucking get it. But they don't. Uh, but just to bring this discussion round circle before we go into our outros and stuff is I did want to the beginning and end, the heart and soul of any piece like this begins and ends with writing, and I don't know if the narrative arcs how silly they were for things to get. In smart writing, there is distinct ways and there's logical ways things lead to other things, cause and effect ratios and leading into other actions and things like that to create arcs where this, like there's whole scenes where you're probably saying to yourself, why are they doing this? Or how is this leading into this? And I think I would say that's purposeful as well. I don't think he was like lazy, because you hear that in writing all the time. There's lazy writing, like because plot. A lot of people say that now
Yeah.
because plot happened and this needed to happen, so we're here now. Whereas in his movies, there's a lot more meaningful ways to move those characters through the narrative. Where in this one, yeah, I think he purposefully would, when they were trying in the second act, when Zoe Bell's character was trying to convince um, the other female character to just borrow the car and do ship's mast and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and the reasoning was like, "I'll crack your back." It's like, "I'll crack your back and I'll be your slave." And I think in like any other movie, it's like, because that was it. When you think about what was the one thing that led to the rest of the car chase and everything, all of these amazing set pieces, that was it.
Yeah.
Her saying, I'll crack your back if you'll do this for me." And she was like, "Okay." I found that so funny.
Yeah.
She was just like, "Okay, I'll do that for you." And then they go on this event. They do the fun part,
Yeah.
right? And what's cool is Zoe Bell is a real
Stunt.
stunt
Yeah.
actress. They met on Kill Bill because Zoe Bell was Uma Thurman's
Stunt double.
stunt double, and she didn't really, this was her very first role, like her first
Starring
traditional
role.
role,
Yeah.
starring role, yeah. And she famously didn't know how big it was until she started seeing billboards like with her name and shit on them, be like, "Oh, okay, this is big time." How cool would that
I
be, like
think
for
it's
just a
really
stunt
cool,
woman?
and because especially when you're bringing out because stunt doubles and they've been getting more appreciation lately, like with social media, you see a lot of the actors taking pictures with their stunt doubles and kind of saying,
Sure.
they're doing a lot of the hard work. I'm just the pretty face here. But yeah, I think it's always cool.
Well, that's you need to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's
Yeah,
essentially a not a buddy cop. It's not a cop movie, but it's like a buddy cop dynamic between an actor and a stunt double.
yeah.
I think you knew that part
I
though,
did know
right?
that.
You knew the
I
premise,
knew the
right?
premise of it.
Okay.
And I know it has something to do with the a little bit with Charles Manson stuff, but um
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, no, I still need to watch it. It's on the list of
Yeah.
things to watch. I have so many things been watching
Yeah.
lately.
Oh god, there's too much content. Even us doing the show, it's too
I have
much.
my
It's too
Star
much.
Wars cartoon right now. I have Loki. I mean, that's
Yep. You better just give up
I just
to the Hollywood gods. You have
had to
to
buy the Black
you have no
Widow.
life outside of yep, you have no life outside of what they want you to
Had to
watch.
buy
Anyways,
Yep.
let's bring this home because I'm not even sure. I feel like in our pre-shows, I'm not even sure if I convinced you, T Buck, that this, this movie deserves more love. Now that we've talked about it for almost an hour, tell the people, did they need to see it again? Does it deserve more love? I still am on the side of this does not deserve as much hate as it gets or criticism. I think it's some of his better work a lot of the times. When I really, really think about it, there's a lot going on here. And so, what side are you still? Are you still on
Um,
the other
well,
end of the
what I was
fence?
gonna say is, does it deserve the hate that it receives? No.
Okay, good.
Does it need to be more praised uh, or more seen in a different light?
Examined.
I think it's in a good spot. I think I think
It's in a good spot to for people to re-examine it.
no, I think it's in the place where it should be. I don't.
Ah,
This is not my
okay.
favorite film. I think the technical things that they did is what I like mostly about that. But I mean, it's perfectly. I think it's in a it's perfectly where it should be
In his
in
filmography.
filmography because it is intentionally supposed to be bad. It's
And a lot of people think it's really bad.
Yeah, a lot of people's really bad, but that's why I say it shouldn't get the hate that it receives because it was intentional, and you should appreciate it
Yeah.
for that. Is it the greatest movie ever made
Well,
in Tarantino movie? No,
that's
absolutely
where
not.
I feel like we almost need another episode. That's where it still gets criticized. Even as I mean, obviously, I imagine there is a percentage of people that don't know that it was made to be a B movie or C movie, and they see it and like this fucking sucks. But
Yeah,
I'm saying of the camp of critical thinkers that know it was made to be this way, still don't like it.
well, yeah, and I can't help those
That's where
people that
that's where it gets
don't get
complicated.
it because that frustrates me. Those are like the people that think that Titanic actually the film Titanic that Jack and everybody were
that
actual
that
real
happened.
people. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I mean, because yeah, it's so a great example of the okay, Starship
Go.
Troopers, and I feel
Oh
like we
god, I
need to have
love
a show just on
I
that.
love oh
But
yeah, I'd be down for that. I fucking love that
that
movie.
movie
But
is
it's made to be kind of a silly,
it's an
monster
intentional,
movie.
and people did not get that. They thought it was an action movie that was just a really bad low budget kind of, or it wasn't low budget, but kind of a corny, cheesy action movie, sci-fi action movie, and it was not. It was a satire. I mean, they purposely lit the sets to make it look like 90210. Like they really did, and they picked the actors and everything because it was a
That's funny.
satire about fascism and things like
Yeah.
that, and that's why I love it. I think it's the same thing with this. Is you know it's purposely meant to be bad and it's supposed to look bad. And if people don't get that and appreciate that, that's what drives me more nuts than anything.
Hmm.
So I'm not
Okay.
saying that it should be in this canon of like great movies, but it's exactly in the place that it should be. it's a
Okay.
good example.
So, I think a good conclusionary point is to just leave it up to the viewer.
Yeah,
So, if there's anybody out there that has not seen this yet, it, at least do yourself a
gotta
artistic
watch it,
favor and give it a try. Yeah, give it a
especially if you
watch,
like Tarantino
and
stuff.
yeah, and come to your own conclusions. I feel like that's another thing is of the people that are huge Tarantino fans, they've seen everything except this. So, if you haven't seen this, go ahead and do yourself that favor. See it, let us know what you think, and come to your own conclusions. We'd love to hear them. So, thank you so much for listening. As always, we appreciate you. But before we go, of course, we have a little more, a little icing on the cake, a little cherry on top with what we call the gem of the week. If you don't know what the gem of the week is, it's essentially something we like to talk about here on our show, but it doesn't always fit into the overall scheme of the main body of the show. We like to talk about it here at the end. Mine is closely tied to the movie. I would say if you don't have the patience to see the actual Grindhouse feature, a double feature, at least I mean, do that, see the Grindhouse feature, but make sure you pay special attention to the fake trailers they made
Mhm.
for it. So they got their other friends, Eli Roth and all these other guys to make these little tiny, few minute trailers, and it plays between the movies. And some of those trailers were so well liked they made actual movies from them. I'm gonna let you figure out what they are. It'll be a little puzzle. But even if you don't see the movie, just fucking YouTube it. Okay, just YouTube the trailers. They're fun. They're campy. They're so many different talk about homages again, and I think you'll have so much fun watching them.
Awesome.
Buck.
I so going through this, like one thing that kept bringing, like, kind of popping in my mind was was a lot of these exploitation movies and kind of the some of the later on some of the studios that were behind it. And one,
Hmm.
if you especially have watched a lot of kind of B movies, especially in the late 70s, 80s, they were
Yeah.
all made by a lot of them were made by a company called Canon Films. So there's a documentary out there called Electric Boogaloo: The Wild Untold Story of Canon Films that I highly
Hmm.
suggest. And if you don't know who Canon Films are, they're the ones that did like the Death Proof, uh, not Death Proof. Sorry, was it Death Proof? It's the I'm trying to think of what it is. Death Wish. Sorry, Death Wish.
Death Wish.
Gosh,
Okay. Yeah.
The Death Wish
Not the
movies,
Bruce Willis one, the
the
old
old
Death
movies.
Wish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ones starring uh
I know I
Charles
don't know his
Bronson.
name. I know you're
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah.
So
I can see that mustache in my
yeah,
mind. I think about that
they did a
mustache, I'm like, "That
they did a
guy."
lot of the Chuck Norris films like Delta Force and American Ninja.
Hell yeah.
Some of
Oh,
those.
I love American
Definitely
Ninja.
check it out. It's kind of fun. There's a lot of documentaries about this area. There's also Roger Corman. He has one. He was a famous director at that time. He has a documentary about him as well. But check those out. They kind of go through the craziness and how these companies actually end up making some pretty big and ended up making some pretty big movies by the end of the run. But just
Mhm.
interesting how they came up through this B movie world and this
Hmm.
exploitation era and kind of started making bigger Hollywood movies.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, um, another thoughtful gem from T Buck. He always gives us thoughtful gems. I love it. Well, thank you guys again so much for listening. You, of course, can follow us at all of our socials. That's at underscore Novo underscore day, and day is DE, and at Novo Day Media. You can check out some of our products at novodayproductions.com. There you'll find the entropy sessions, adulteration, and post meridium, and much more to come. And until next time, guys, just you know the drill. Be good to each other, and as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created and hosted by Novo Day and the Novo Day Collective. Facebook.com/Novo Day Media, at Novo Day Media on Twitter and Instagram. Music by A Company. Facebook.com/ACOMusic123, ACO on Spotify. Logo design by Tom Gestus, Jestus, of thejusticecompany.com, and executively produced by Clayton Anderson. All rights reserved.